You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. Mark Pellegrino, once again conspicuous by his absence, but we are in good hands with the one, the only Mr. James Stevens Valliant, otherwise known to us here as Jim. Jim, how goes it?
It's going. A lot is going. Yeah. And
well, I hope you had a good weekend.
I did have a good weekend. Yes.
So, what do we got going on? I got a new episode of the Michael Liebowitz Show out on this channel, The Rational Alternative. I had a debate with Professor Michael Humer. Check it out. Let me know what you think. I'm very curious. I'll tell you what I thought, or if you got any questions now, you can ask, and I'll answer them. What else do we got coming up this week? I'll have I don't know which interview I'm going to be releasing. I'm interviewing Lawrence Reed this afternoon about the French Revolution compared to the American Revolution. I've also got a debate in the vault. I mean, not a debate, an interview with Walter Block that I'm considering releasing. So a lot of good stuff going on. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, The Rational Alternative. We got good programming. We have this. We have The Rational Alternative Weekend. We got The Michael Liebowitz Show. We've got members-only content. Sundays, now it will be at 11 a.m. Anna M. wants to know if I won. So it's very difficult to ask a person whether they think they've won because the person understands in their own head what they want to say and how they're perceiving. It's very difficult. I think I won primarily because the onus of proof is on the person that's making the argument. So when I debated him on egoism, for instance, I felt that I lost because I didn't have the time to make my complete case. I still think I was right, but I didn't think I made the complete case. So if I judge him by the same standard that I judge myself by, I think that I won. Because I don't think that he was able to demonstrate what intuitions are and why we should trust them. And if he can't do that, which is the thrust of his entire argument, then I think he loses and I think he lost. You'd have to watch it for yourself and judge. I always submit my debates to AI. So I know what AI said, but thinking second thoughts, I'm not going to tell you what AI thought. I probably shouldn't do that because then maybe people won't want to debate if they think that I'm going to be out here saying, well, AI said. But that's an interesting thing, Jim, because we have one of our topics today actually is this article on AI. And that we have a bunch of them, and we're going to get to the AI. I don't know. I kind of want to talk about AI first because I'm so impressed with AI. But I think we can get to that afterwards. First, I want to actually talk about Lindsey Graham. Please remember, super chats, super stickers, very appreciated. So Lindsey Graham died. And what catches me about this is all my life, it's been this idea that when someone dies, everybody just comes out, oh, this was the greatest guy since sliced bread. Oh, my God. Nobody has a bad thing to say about him. He was grand, kind to everybody, fed the animals and the children, took everybody to Disneyland, whatever. That's what people do, right? And I've always thought, I don't want people doing that to me. I don't tell the truth. Boy, this guy could sure be impatient at times. You know what I mean? Wow. Just tell the truth. I mean, ultimately, I won't care because I'll be gone. But now there's also something else that's happening. And that's people are really mean when people die. It's not just speaking objective facts, but going to the other extreme. Oh, good riddance, or what an asshole this guy was. What a scumbag. What a jerk. And I really don't like that either. And I don't like that approach to somebody that's living. I like to just be honest and actually address what the person is. But one thing I've noticed, Jim, and after I say this, of course, you'll get your chance to speak, is there seems to be this thing that's happening recently. I noticed it with Charlie Kirk, that when he died, people took his death as an opportunity. as an opportunity to sort of, I don't want to say deify him, but make him greater than he was. And they do that, it seems to me, on the assumption that people won't criticize somebody who's just died. So they attempt to cement a legacy before anybody gets a chance to rebut it. And I've seen that with Lindsey Graham. Oh, this guy, a true American patriot fighting for freedom. He was the best friend of Israel. He's, oh, he took this one on. I remember when he took that one on. And if you're going to do that when somebody dies, it's fair game as far as I'm concerned. To say, no, actually, that's not the truth about the guy or the gal, whatever the case may be. And in Lindsey Graham's case, and I'm not saying, wow, it's great he died, but it's evident to me that this is a guy that if he ever had principles, threw them out the window. Because he went from being a total Trump hater, saying if we nominate this guy, we're going to get what we deserve, we're going to lose, and everything, all that kind of stuff. And then even after he allied with Trump in 2021, after the riot at the Capitol, he said, I'm done with Trump now. But then once the fear left him, and he was able to calm down, then he said, oh, the Republican Party is nothing without Trump, and went right back to that. So I think that Ian Gilmore's assessment is correct, that Lindsey lived long enough to betray. I wouldn't say everything. He was still a hawk. But he did betray an awful lot. I think that's accurate, but I don't think that you really need to get into much more and, really just pissing on the guy's grave. And Robert Naser says, tell the truth, but do so with class, show dignity, because no matter what a piece of work the deceased was, he can't make you be ungracious. And Robert Naser, thank you for the $5, and he's correct as usual. Okay, Jim, now you get your opportunity.
I think that long distance evaluation of someone you don't know. When I hear some famous person dies, I really wonder at why people go through this giant, period. In 1997, when Princess Diana died in that car crash in Paris, I remember how the next month, it seemed like the entire summer of 1997 was taken up with Diana. There's this woman who I never knew, I never met. She seems like a pretty lady. I don't believe in monarchy. But this is how celebrity deaths usually strike me. They don't always strike me that. Sometimes I very much valued the artist's work, let's say, in which case I would say, oh, that's really terrible because that he or she gave me so much. I will mourn their passing. I will mourn the fact that they're no longer providing that value for me. When it comes to politicians, I don't have a positive impression about politicians in general. I can't think of a politician who I would not say has betrayed something or other in Congress. So they're not terribly moral people. They are, you know what I mean? So, but then again, even evaluating that politician becomes difficult because of all kinds of contextual matters. So I normally face the death of a person I never met Senator Graham. I never met Senator Graham. They give me the biography on Senator Graham. His parents died when he was young. He adopted his younger sister, took care of her, made sure she went to college. No one in their family had gone to college before. He went to college. He joins the Air Force. He becomes he becomes the chief European JAG prosecutor in Europe. Okay, so the guy's a decent lawyer, is what it tells me. And he then proceeds to build a career. He succeeds. All of the things being equal, regardless of the person's beliefs. It could be a Democrat. It could be whoever. I think to myself, well, there's some virtue there in this guy coming from nowhere, succeeding, overcoming obstacles like poverty and stuff, educating himself, being the first guy in his family to go to university. Okay, that's on the plus side. But and then, of course, you point out the obvious. Obviously, this guy's politics, look, for decades, I've been angry at Lindsey Graham for various things. He fits on a spectrum on a variety of issues with a variety of different senators. So, for example, on Israel, I have agreed that he is better than most politicians. Good for you, Lindsey Graham. When it comes to defending American values, I would put him on the better end of the spectrum. I would never have placed him on the principled perspective, so I was never disappointed. See, for me, Ronald Reagan was a disappointment from the outset. So I don't know what when we say betrayal, what is he betraying? I'd have to know what his values were. So I guess what I'm saying at the end of the day is that a personal evaluation of Lindsey Graham is sort of beyond my ability to make, right? Of him as a human being completely. I'd need a whole lot more context to be able to evaluate him. His effect on me, well, as a politician, generally negative. Now, compared to other members of Congress and the Senate, he was on the lighter end of that. He was on the better end of that, and sometimes did things that were sometimes better and opposed. For example, obviously, let's take one classic example with Lindsey Graham. He voted for Obama's Supreme Court justices. He thought that there shouldn't be an ideological test going on in the Senate. That used to be the idea. Not always, but it was an idea that developed in the 20th century, certainly, and Lindsey Graham adhered to it. We shouldn't have an ideological litmus test. Y'all should be able to vote for a Republican nominee just like I can vote for a Democrat nominee if they meet this, vague qualification, ABA qualification or something. And he was consistent with that, even though I myself, the minute they stopped doing that on the Democrat side, you got to stop doing it on the Republican side. The minute I don't even know if that was a value in the first place, but the minute people like Ted Kennedy in the 80s are throwing up ideological objections to Bork, now we have to be ideological on the other side. Otherwise it's a one-way battle. But he had a principle. Now you say to yourself, did he adhere to this principle? Well, he kind of did adhere to the principle, and he was constantly telling people this is the way we should vote for Supreme Court justices in the Senate. So in that sense, he was principled, as politicians go. His ability to say out loud to the Trumpsters after January 2020, 2021, this is wrong, I'm done with you, says something about him, yes. His forgiveness of Trump, okay. This is what politicians do. This is what pragmatists do. They adjust to the reality. And by adjusting to reality, will they be betraying principles that we hold dear? Every time. Now, Lindsey Graham didn't see it that way, obviously. Lindsey Graham saw the world in a very, very different light. In the immediate wake of someone's dying, I don't care who it is. I mean, short of, say, a Hitler or a Stalin or a Charles Manson or something, I'm not going to, do the end zone dance and spike the ball. Why? Because there are people out there, and I don't know the range. I mean, people may not even share his politics and be mourning him. So I'm not going to be an asshole and just start dumping on the guy in the immediate wake of his death. That's rude. I was brought up better. I wasn't brought up by wolves. On the other hand, as you point out, I'm not going to lie about my assessment. He's a pragmatist. He's one of these pragmatist rhinos, in effect, who could be with a moderate gang of seven, who could find common ground. Now, that's the kind of pragmatist that repulses me. And that's the kind of pragmatist he was. So at the end of the day, I'm going to say he was a politician, a pragmatist, a moderate with all the negatives that came with that. But he was a definite mixed bag. He was the kind of guy who could say out loud, January 20th, or January 7th, 2021, that was a big mistake, Trumpsters. And yet still, now this is the thing, still make it up with Trump and become his golfing buddy. That both of those tell you things about him, don't they? Well, both tell you something about him.
Well, yeah, everything that a person does tells you something about the person. Robert says, of course,
are particularly revealing, because he could say, that's outrageous, and I'm still your golfing buddy.
I'm going to tell you what I think it says in just a moment. But Robert Naser says, of course, as one would expect, Amy and I discussed this last night. You can be honest while not displaying the worst manners, styles, grace, and class. Thank you for the $5. I assume this was on 5 Minutes with Robert and Amy. Robert Naser. Okay, so a couple things. The difference, I think you're right about the obsession that people have when others die, when famous people die, is weird. I do. In the case of politicians, though, it's a bit different in the sense that these politicians are making decisions that affect your life, right? That affect my life. And it's the same thing. So with evaluating people that you don't know, right? You don't know what this guy does at night. You don't know how he is, if he has children, family, friends, whatever. There's a whole list of things. But politicians necessarily ask to be assessed when they ask for our vote, right? So you kind of have to assess them, and you can only do so based on the information that you have. Now, Lindsey Graham was a big John McCain supporter in 2000. He was always supposed to be a great friend of John McCain. They were the three amigos or whatever with Joe Lieberman. And they painted themselves as the sort of moderate voices, right? I don't like moderates. I don't mean personally. I mean as far as politicians go, right? As far as I don't like moderate policies. But when Lindsey Graham would go on a Sunday show and talk back then, I expected I would get the truth. I wouldn't get some partisan spin. You know, like when John McCain, for instance, tells the woman that when she says Barack Obama's an Arab, and he says, no, ma'am, no. And he takes the microphone from her. Now, I was naive when I would think this about the moderates, because ultimately, and this has been pointed out to me by people who knew politicians find a niche for themselves. And they find the niche that works, that's going to get them elected into office and keep them there. That's their primary concern. So whether Lindsey Graham betrayed principles, I don't know that he ever had any. I do know there was an abrupt and big change from the guy who was part of the Gang of Eight, who wasn't a partisan, who would critique critique the whole Trump phenomenon, all that stuff. Between that guy and the guy that then was defending Trump no matter what, there was a big change. The guy who had previously said,
the problem is there. See, it's the original credit that you were giving him.
That's the problem. No, I don't disagree. What I'm saying is
his John McCain alliance and moderateness is actually the same thing.
It's just trying to cater to the specific audience. I didn't know that back then. I should have known better. I'm just saying that this is what happens. So now the guy that was supposed to be his friend, John McCain, is repeatedly trashed by this new guy. And Lindsey Graham is just, okay with it. Like, if Jim Valliant dies and somebody is out there trashing Jim Valliant, that guy is not going to be my golfing buddy.
I could never, ever, if they did that to you, Mike, there are people who've done that to you. And if they go so far as they went with, as Trump went with McCain, they're no longer my friend.
So I think what was revealed on either the early hours of January 7th or the late hours of January 6th, when Lindsey says, I'm done with this, I'm out, fear. He was terrified. He thought he was going to die or get badly hurt. And he said, I don't want to be involved in this anymore. But fear wanes. It goes away. And once that fear passed, he went back to the Trump devotee that he had been beforehand. That's all that happened. There was no principled stand there. I mean, the overwhelming evidence indicates that. The evidence of how he acted before, how he acted afterwards, and his whole demeanor during that speech. But again, I think that my main point here is I think that we can assess what Lindsey Graham did as a public figure in these moments, right? Without trashing him completely as a human being. I don't need to do that. I don't need to celebrate his death. It's like you said, he's got family. He's got people that care about him. Those people didn't do anything to me. I don't know, I don't know them. They might be good people. There was this guy a few months ago that died in prison. I think he was killed. I'm not sure. And there were all these people on the Facebook page. Oh, good riddance. Screw him. He got what he wanted. Got what was coming to him. I hope they tortured him. All kinds of stuff like that. And I'm just thinking, what if this guy has children that see this? Those children sure as hell didn't do anything to you, right? And now you're going to do this to them for what? Like, what is the point? How does that make you feel better? The irony here, Jim, in my view, is that people like Cenk Uygur and what's her name, Anna Kasparian, that are going overboard to criticize him, as well as the people going overboard to praise him, are doing the exact same thing he did. They're being pragmatists in pursuit of catering to a specific audience. He needed to cater to the voters and to the president. They want to cater to the audience that's tuning into their programmings or going onto their sites on X or wherever they are. And it's all, like you said, just a really disgusting form of pragmatism.
Yeah, and I can see that his support for Israel was at times really fact-based. That is to say, his criticism of Iran, for example, was fact-based. So I do believe it may have been held emotionally, and this is the way pragmatists do it. They hold it emotionally. So it's like Professor Humer's intuitions. They're running around sort of with the humoristic, I'll invent a term, a humoristic delusion that their moral intuitions are enough to get them by. And Lindsey Graham has these moral intuitions that, sometimes are correct. Iran's dangerous, that I agree with. Israel's the civilized place, I agree with. And he'll say it sort of in a semi way. So you get, okay, there's some factual basis that's stimulating your position here, but it's not what we would call at all a principled one. That's why our implicit values have to be made explicit. I'm answering Professor Humer too. Our implicit values have to be made explicit. We have to know why that was our value in the first place, why we came to that conclusion that this was a value or a disvalue. And that's what pragmatists don't do. They're perfectly happy to sit on it as an emotional thing and go by the seat of their pants, if you will. And so I guess we can evaluate the God by his intuitions. Are your intuitions a little better than the other guy's intuitions? That's not a morally significant, in my lights, way of evaluating someone. The truth is, he was a law-abiding guy. The truth is, I don't think he meant malice to people. Does that give him some ethical credit? Yes. On the other hand, he was a politician whose pragmatic deals actually did hurt people. Is that a reality that we have to take into account? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I have no special window into that man's consciousness, that man's soul. But I would have to, if you press me, and if you say morally evaluate Lindsey Graham, I would have to say that on one level, he was like a lot of ordinary people are today. Not a really bad guy who went out and killed people and hurt people and had malice towards them. No. On the other hand, was he a pragmatist and a power luster and someone who thought that, the government could do this and this and this that really I am sure that they ought not to do. And it will hurt people. And you're evading that, Senator Graham? Yeah, that's true too. I think it's true of all politicians on Capitol Hill. I mean, I have a hard time at the end of the day, honestly, positively evaluating any of them for that reason. But it would be balanced out with my look at the world around today. Look at his context. He wasn't a particularly malicious guy. I know that sounds wishy-washy. So at the end of the day, you've pressed me on an evaluation of Senator Graham, and I've given you this ambiguous and mixed picture. Well, that's the way it is. I'm afraid.
Well, but you have partial information. I mean,
yeah, he's also a mixed bag at the end of the day.
Sure. So I don't know if you ever heard of Michael Skakel. You must have, as a prosecutor, I can imagine. Yeah. So Michael Skakel is a Kennedy cousin. He went to prison for murder. He ultimately was released. I don't know the exact, if it was a technical issue or an actual innocence thing. I don't know. It doesn't matter for what I'm going to say. But Michael Skakel told a friend of mine, and I have every reason to believe that this conversation took place. There's no reason for me to doubt it, that he once worked on his Uncle Teddy's campaign. And he said he got so disgusted with it, he basically just never wants anything to do with politics again, because he says it's all about figuring out basically what voters are going to want to hear. Can we do this? How do we tailor the message for this? And how are we going to get them all to vote for us? It's not about what's the right thing to do, what's going to work best for the country, what are the proper principles, nothing. It's just about, okay, this is where I live. What do the voters here want? And let me see what I can do. And whatever, it's gross. But the death of Lindsey Graham, it's interesting because there was an article in Reason magazine that I think actually came out prior to the death of Lindsey Graham. and it was called something about gerontocracy. And it talked about and it was talked about Mitch McConnell, first of all, and all the old people, right, in office in the United States Senate, and how this is not a good thing for a variety of reasons. So I had a spreadsheet made out of all their ages, and if I counted correctly, and I may have missed some, whatever, but 33 are in their 70s, and 31 are in their 60s. That means that nearly 2/3 of the United States Senate are either senior citizens or close to it, right? Now, I think we should judge people, on an individual basis, of course. Nevertheless, by the time you're in your mid 60s, cognitive decline is a real thing. It does happen. I mean, you know what I mean? So
the 60 line, I can tell you that it's already
right. I mean, it doesn't seem like a good thing to me.
There's huge individual variation.
That's true.
Variation is such that a 98-year-old person could have entirely different cognitive decline symptoms from an 87-year-old.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree, Jim. Yeah. But when 2/3 of the Senate, and these guys have been there for a long time, a lot of them. Chuck Grassley's been there.
Notice that was part of the intention. 6-year terms. Woo! They mean the founding fathers meant the senators to be there for a while.
They did. Yeah. I don't know if that's a good thing in retrospect. I mean, at the time, I get it. It was a bulwark, against democracy.
Continuity, stability, all that.
Right. I do. And I'm not saying there's nothing to be said for that.
Big radical changes.
Right.
But nevertheless, the on that. And see, the reason why I like it is that it puts the brakes on any new idea, even good ones. Now, I'm going to make my point very, very clear. The ship of state should move and turn very slowly. That was the idea. If our ideas, if our principles that guide this ship of state, our Constitution, are valid and universal and forever, then there shouldn't be big. In fact, the fact that there are big issues like that tells me how far we've come from the framers' vision of what government really is.
Yeah, and
a lot of objectivists will oppose term limits because term limits were thought about by our
and I personally oppose them. I do.
Because it interferes with the voters' will.
It does.
And the only real way to shut down, given the power of incumbency, which we all know, you're going to have. How long was who's this senator that 30-some? Oh yeah, Senator Collins from Maine. She's been there over 30 years. Joe Biden was there for 35 years. Lindsey Graham was there for 26 years?
24, I think Lindsey was there.
Something like that. It was before 2005 he was in the Senate, right? So
2002, I believe he got to
2002. That's 23 years or something?
Think about it. What's going on? Is this cognitive decline? It's math. It's 2026 to 22. It's 24 years.
24 years. There we go. Okay, very good. Well, I had another number in my head. But the point, though, is that if you don't like this, then the only way to really handle it, if it's just the numbers that are concerning you, is term limits. And if you don't like term limits, then get over it.
Well, I don't think that's the only way to handle it.
They're going to be in there for decades.
I disagree that that's the only way to handle it. And I'll tell you why. Because the people, to handle any problems that we have with our government.
Okay, I wasn't answering that, was I?
With any problems, it ultimately
this gerontology problem. If it really is numbers.
Yeah, but that in turn comes down to the people that keep electing the people to office. And that's always going to be the case. And term limits don't really fix that, do they?
So if the person, and it's always this guy compared to that guy, isn't it? So it could be this guy's been there forever. He's a problematic pragmatist, and he's beating everyone. Well, I would need to know each of the people that he ran against. And I would say, yeah, against that person, I'm voting for Lindsey. Well, yeah, against that person, I'm voting for Lindsey.
I kind of disagree with that point. Not with what you're saying about looking and comparing. What I'm saying is that we ourselves generate the choices, right? Of the people that are going to run, the people that are going to challenge in primaries, the people that get elected. All of that ultimately stems from what people want. And I don't care if you put 2-year term limits on everybody. If the American people want Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all kinds of regulations to prevent global warming or whatever else, you're not going to fix that.
Term limits don't go to that at all.
No.
If your problem was just the numbers of how long they last, though,
then term limits would do it. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I look at the gerontocracy thing. I do think it's concerning, but it's concerning as it's a symptom of a bigger problem, and that comes down to the American voter that elects these people.
So, if you were to reform that to eliminate this problem, what would you suggest?
I wouldn't suggest any institutional reforms.
Right.
What I would suggest is that we just continue making arguments to the American people about things like liberty, about the rule of law, about the Constitution. That's the only way out. It doesn't. You could try to put in any type of institutional mechanisms you want. If the people in the country want something to go a certain way, it's going that way. You could do everything that they did in Atlas Shrugged, have Judge Narragansett come in, write new amendments to the Constitution, be ready to go, and then if the American people don't want to hold to that, politicians are going to go against it. They're ultimately going to nominate judges who are going to overrule it, and if the people don't care, you're just going to keep getting it. And that's the real bottom line, right? By the way,
I like 6-year terms for senators because I happen to agree with the idea of the founding fathers. Their job description is such that we shouldn't be rocking the boat every other week. The same reason why I believe in lifetime tenure for judges, especially Supreme Court judges, and why I so oppose any Democrat proposal that would put age limits or term limits on Supreme Court justices. You say, well, cognitive decline. No, then impeach him or remove him or he quits. I do not trust. In fact, our principles are universal. Our principles are eternal. And if the principles of the founding are universal, eternal truths, then we should not want rapid turnover either in the Senate or on the Supreme Court. These are eternal principles, and we should have continuity with them. We should not have lots of breaks with them or expect lots of breaks with them. And both attempts, if you were trying to get rid of a long term for a senator or life tenure for federal judges, both of those would go against that. So the higher value to me, even higher than worrying about how old these senators are, is the continuity issue.
Yeah, I think the age of the Senate, which I think is the oldest, these are the oldest people of any political body on the planet, if I'm not mistaken.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Right. So I think it's a problem. I also think it's a problem, for instance, that you have people that claim to be originalists their entire political careers, and now all of a sudden say that the 14th Amendment doesn't mean what it says it means, and that the War Powers Clause in the Constitution, that doesn't really mean what it says it means something else. That's just as concerning. And until people understand the importance of principles, what they are, what the good principles are, you're going to keep having these different things. I think that the gerontocracy is a symptom of the problem, but I don't think I wouldn't advocate starting making structural changes to get rid of that.
Though, Clarence Thomas, original intent people, would tell us that, look, I'm not going to give meaning to the big, broad implications of some phrase in the Constitution because you think the plain meaning says that. No. We have to restrict the meaning to the meaning that was given at the time those words were, and that was the freed black slaves. Full stop. Since we're,
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree with that.
I just want to let you know, original intent. If you're going to really go by original intent, rather than the full.
Okay, this is a monumental straw man. Valiant is putting out a monumental straw man.
Okay, let me finish. Rather than the full conceptual meaning of the words as stated, then what original intent people, this is what they always do. They restrict it to whatever the conception of its scope was at the time. That is the nature of, that's why I oppose original intent. That is just one classic example.
Here's the problem, and Jim, you know this, and it makes me want to reach through the screen and grab you by your new haircut. Originalism normally does not refer to original intent. It refers because that would mean getting inside the heads of the people who passed the legislation. Originalism, generally speaking, it's not to say nobody ever argues for original intent, but generally speaking, originalism refers to the original meaning of the words as they were understood at the time.
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a. I think that meaning versus intent is a pretty meaningless distinction.
Oh, world of difference.
No.
World of difference.
I don't care.
So
I don't care what in their. See, it's totally rationalistic to go by dictionary definitions from Samuel Johnson. That's the wrong approach.
Well, okay, hold on a second. So if you want to figure out what words mean, like subject to the jurisdiction thereof, for instance, you wouldn't look to the meaning of how people thought of those words when they were written.
Meaning, not the dictionary definition.
Well, okay, so you're gonna ascribe a different definition or a different meaning to the word jurisdiction. Then what are you going to do?
The same referential meaning, not necessarily the same definition.
Where are you going to get this from?
Well, free speech, the real factual reason why we have protections against censorship applies just as much to the internet and TV and even technologies I'm not even aware of. So the meaning includes the reference and even reference that don't exist yet.
But that's the principle of freedom of speech.
But it's neither original meaning nor original intent.
It is absolutely is original meaning. It absolutely is.
Okay, so they knew the internet? They
didn't have to.
Television?
No, but they certainly
would include in the meaning of that radio communications.
They don't need to because
stuff outside the meaning at the time.
No, stuff outside a specific definition, but they certainly understood that there would be new ways of communication.
What if the definition had said in spoken or written form?
Well, then this First Amendment wouldn't apply
to the definition and keep to the real reason for the First Amendment.
No, I would not.
Okay,
no, I would not.
That's how I go about it.
Yeah, but then you're just changing. You're changing the document.
Not.
Of course you are.
Not the meaning in the objective sense.
Yes, Ian Gilmore's absolutely correct.
Flexible.
Yes, of course, Ian. Concepts include things yet under
and the current
include things yet undiscovered.
Is what's flexible and gives.
The problem is people ratify these things. The document was ratified. It was written and ratified by specific people who understood it to mean specific things. You don't get to come in and say, well, I've studied objectivism. I understand concept formation.
If we put James Madison and Thomas Jefferson into a time machine and took them to the 20th century, I think they would have readily agreed that censorship includes radio, television, internet. Things they had not even included in the meaning.
But that's not what originalism says.
That is exactly
Jim.
What it means.
No, it's not.
Clarence Thomas doing it here.
Jim, Clarence Thomas, first of all,
does not include everybody.
Jim,
it includes the free black slaves.
BS, Jim.
So, for example, when we
if you look at the debates, you know Thomas is wrong. He's just wrong. If you go to the debates, it was talked about in the debates when Jacob Howard wrote the goddamn amendment. During the debates, somebody actually said, so am I to understand then that children of Chinese immigrants are going to be citizens? And somebody said, yes, absolutely. If you go up and look up the meaning of jurisdiction at the time, and you look at the text, who it didn't include would be Indians.
You are now looking at external evidence.
I'm looking at the meaning of these terms.
You don't,
Jim.
Do that. All I need is a dictionary from 1870 and the 14th Amendment.
It's all you need.
According to original intent, I shouldn't even have to go back. Now you're saying
that's not original intent. That's original meaning, Jim. It's two different things.
In which case, then you've opened up the entire can of worms to exactly what the problem is.
No, you haven't. You keep saying original intent as if original intent and original meaning are the same thing. They're not. I
don't see the distinction.
How don't you see the distinction
if it's original
between?
Then it is original intent.
No, it's not.
Okay, now, no, dude.
No, it's not.
Give me a big juicy example of the difference.
I'll give you a big juicy example right out of Lysander Spooner. It's clear that the people who wrote the 1808 importation clause were referring to slaves. That's what they intended. The plain meaning of the wording at the time says nothing about slavery, which is why Lysander Spooner argues that slavery was in fact unconstitutional. He said, we're not going by backdoor bargains and backdoor deals. We're going by the explicit meaning of the terms at the time the thing was adopted. And it's the same thing. If you want to know what the word subject to the jurisdiction thereof meant at the time of adoption, you could look to the dictionaries at the time. That would tell you the plain public meaning, not what's going on inside Senator Howard's head.
It's the intent. If
it's not the
meaning
intent.
And they put those words in, that was the intent.
No, Jim,
Give me an
it's
example
not.
of the difference.
If you had a specific senator,
I still don't have an example.
I just gave you one, Jim.
No,
what do you
that
mean?
wasn't.
Of course it was. Not only that, but at the time of the ratification of the 14th Amendment, if you had 5 specific senators whose only intention was to give freed slaves citizenship, right? But the public meaning of the terms used wouldn't have limited it in that way. You'd have a clear distinction between intent and meaning. Right there. You could shake your head till you're blue in the face. Of course it is.
Of course not.
How?
How could it be any different?
I just told you.
No.
They intended one thing.
You could make the same exact... Look, I don't even look to what the senators were flapjawing about until there's some ambiguity, right?
Right. But there's really
Right.
not ambiguity. I only mention that because it's a demonstration of how people interpreted the words.
So if
but
the
all
answer
you would
to
need
the-
to do is
okay.
look up word definitions at
Right,
the
but if
time.
the answer to the quiz can be found in the meaning at the time,
And it
the
can.
language used, then
And it can.
intent
it can.
and meaning are equivalent.
No, they're not. Again, they're not. So everybody that signs on to this thing, they all have the same exact intention.
No, that's precisely the thing. We don't know.
Yes.
We're not going to guess.
No, you don't have to guess. You go by the plain meaning of
Clarence
the term
Thomas
at
would
the
say,
time.
You're guessing,
Clarence Thomas
right? You're
has
using all
clearly
this
gone
external evidence.
astray.
It may be true. You're using
No,
all this
no,
external
no.
evidence, but
Hold
that
on.
doesn't answer his
Wait a
question.
second. Hold on. Would Scalia have said you can't use dictionary definitions from the time?
I think he would have been happy to use dictionary definitions at the time.
Of course he would have, because it demonstrates plain meaning. What Scalia would have argued is you don't need to go into legislative history. All you need to know is the plain
Sometimes
meaning
you
of the
do,
words.
though. Even
But
Scalia
Scal-
said
okay,
sometimes you
but
do.
yeah, but the point
So
is
when?
he would say you go by the plain meaning of the words at the time. If you go by the plain meaning of the words at the time, the 14th Amendment clearly confers citizenship on anybody born here, outside of invading children of invading armies and occupying forces,
Okay.
and
Real
of
problem
course
is they don't want
diplomats.
whether it's original intent or original meaning. What they don't want is they don't want the open-ended, what the real meaning and the real intent was to kick open an open-ended set of rights considerations, say in the Privileges and Immunities Clause or the Due Process Clause. It was meant to be open-ended and go figure it out, which flies right in the face of both original intent and original meaning. So
That's
on that
flat
ground,
wrong.
he
What you
just
just said is
blows it
flat
up.
wrong. That's
Just
flat
blows
wrong
it
what
up.
you just said. No, you're flat wrong. If you
No,
read the
that's
Federalist Papers,
right.
if you read what they actually said about constitutional interpretation at the time, you're just wrong. As a matter of historical fact, you're wrong. And anybody in the audience can go read the Federalist. I mean, just look it up.
You're up against the reality of the facts that the Privileges and Immunity Clause was gutted by people who believed that those words were so vague and open-ended they couldn't be given good meaning.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
That
Oh,
speaks
well,
to
we
the
have
problem,
that.
not
So
to
we
that's what you're
have
saying.
A bunch of latent rights that have gone completely unprotected because everyone, to some extent, believes that whether it's original intent or original meaning or however they parse it, both are bizarre restrictions.
No, that's not.
Obvious meaning of words.
No, that's not what it is. It's the people who think
Well,
no,
that's the reality of how it's been interpreted.
but they don't do it based on the
Constitution
original
protects
meaning.
a whole lot more liberties than
Yeah.
our courts protect.
But Jim, but the people who do that don't do it based on the idea that they're going by any original meaning.
That is
What they go,
precisely what they're going
no,
by.
they take the living Constitution view, Jim.
Even the living Constitution people we're dealing in a world of words, and the original intent and meaning people.
They're
are the
written
ones
in
that-
words, Jim.
What?
It's written in words. What are you
Right.
talking about?
So
What are you going to
even
go
they-
by?
You're missing my point altogether. Even they deal with the word, the phrasing, the intent, the legislative history. So if you were to say, well, living constitution, that does not bypass all those arguments. They still engage in that argumentation. They still engage in the argumentation over precedent. This case meant that. This case stood for that. This case stood for that. Because
Sure.
the original language was this.
Because nobody is going to come out and do what and say out loud what they're actually doing. They're not going to come out and say, "Oh, we're just making this up right
So
now."
what they will do is they will give you some philosophical or a political reason, whatever the reason, the economic reason, the sociological reason. So they will add to that, but it will be the frosting, if you will. Now, you and I both know that's the real motive, but for their argument, for their superficial bullshit argument, it will be the frosting. Well, we got to be.
Well, no,
loosey-goosey.
not to that extent, Jim. They actually
the
argue
essence
that
of these living constitution people's argument is what Blackmun did with Roe versus Wade. Well, I went to an abortion clinic and I talked to OBGYNs. That's going to be the thrust of their argument.
what they argue is that we have to use words and with the evolving standards of the
history,
times.
Given the words,
Right, but
I can't make this up out of whole cloth. Even they would say.
No, they're not. But the point is that if you don't restrict yourself to original meaning, that's what you're getting.
And every time a conservative says original meaning, he's constraining what the words are actually implying. Every time.
What do you mean he's constraining it?
Thomas.
So hold on a second.
Example.
So when Randy
Slaughterhouse
Barnett,
gave us a great
hold on.
example.
Yeah,
go through
Jim,
the history.
I'm not gonna defend the hypocrisy. Clarence Thomas is clearly a hypocrite and clearly not restricting himself to original meaning.
I don't know that.
Well, if he's gonna
I think
argue
in his
that
own mind he's wrong, but I don't know that in his own mind he can't have a way of understanding this.
if he argues that the original meaning of the terms at the time only was referring to descendants of slaves, he's definitely wrong.
See, Michael, you've got a very interesting perspective. It is not a perspective that I've heard from a conservative justice, though.
It's Scalia's perspective.
No, not exactly.
Yes.
Scalia was not perfectly consistent with that either.
Oh, no.
Scalia would do the same thing Thomas is doing
Hold on.
the time.
The argument isn't about whether Scalia is consistent. I'm talking about the principle that Scalia advocated.
The basic thrust of it, then. You're missing the very motive.
What, that judges are hypocritical liars? I'm not missing that at all.
Well, that could answer anything on any issue.
Well, but that's what you get.
No, the motive for original intent and original meaning is to put guardrails around the meaning so that it doesn't have the broad scope that it seems to have.
It's so that you know ahead of time how you're supposed to behave and what is expected of you. That's why the rule of law is important. Justice Scalia used Justice Scalia's.
We bring those out, right? It has to be objective, has to be consistent. So that's an important principle. That does not mean that we won't be making legal discoveries. In fact, it is vital that we not preclude the development of legal thinking.
You know what you have to keep up with modern times and modern developments? Elections, legislation.
Yeah,
that's what you have. That's the method. Amendments.
And things move. There's a reason. We don't just have elections. I'm looking at it from the constitutional standpoint. We have judges. And these judges are saying, well, screw the elections. This is what the Constitution says. And that the meaning they give to the Constitution is a moving target. And
right. And that's the problem.
Even in an objectivist paradise, it will be a moving target.
Jim, what you just said is the problem.
No.
So it's good that it's a moving target?
Judicial system.
So it's a good thing that it's a moving target.
I think that we're constantly going to have to interpret, given there's new fact patterns constantly arising. Okay, and they will continue to arise.
Then what you need to do...
We need a judiciary to continue to apply the principles in the Constitution to new fact patterns.
Nobody denies that, Jim.
It is an ongoing
process. Nobody on the planet denies that. No originalist denies that you have to apply principles to new situations. They don't deny that. Originalists don't. Scalia certainly didn't. They don't say...
To keep the principle to the limited context that it was originally meant, in their view, originally meant for.
So hold on. So they would say that the Second Amendment, you're telling me Scalia would say the Second Amendment only applies to muskets. That's what Scalia would say. No, of course not. Why not? If he can't apply a principle to modern times, then why not? Would they really say that free speech only occurs, it's only referenced to town halls and what you're writing? No, of course
they wouldn't
not.
have done that. No.
Because they apply the principle to modern times. That's still consistent, Jim.
We wouldn't have the FCC if both sides didn't do that to some degree.
And Scalia would get rid of the FCC.
Would he?
I believe so.
Would he?
Believe so.
Would
I mean, if he were consistent. Now, we know that they're not because they're all political creatures.
I think he would have said, well, radio. See, that's precisely the thing. Radio broadcast frequencies was just an unknown thing at the time. Therefore, we may need whole new principles to deal with radio broadcast frequencies. We can't just, by rote, apply the same things that we've been doing with print media.
Jim, we got to get to socialism.
Okay, you're right.
Not literally.
We've been for the better part of an hour on this.
Yeah, we have to get to the socialism stuff. Tell them about the article, the AI article, what they want and what's wrong with it.
Oh, geez. No. You go.
Okay.
What the hell?
I wanted to Google Scalia on the.
No.
No, I wanted to look up Scalia on the FCC. I did it. I got that. Well, I'll go.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll go to it afterwards. Okay.
Right, afterwards.
So the article was in Jacobin magazine, and what they're advocating is collective ownership of artificial intelligence, of AI. They actually argue that Bernie Sanders is too limited because he's keeping it in regard to American citizens, where Americans are going to own 50%, but it's really a global thing. And the argument they're making is that we've all contributed to AI. How have you contributed? Well, they have your data, because you're on the internet already and they're using your data to construct models. So you're contributing and therefore you should be given a piece. It's the old, you didn't build that. You didn't do that on your own. It's the same argument repackaged and addressed to AI, which the socialists are claiming it needs to be owned by everybody. And not only that, but the decisions they argue, if it's limited to the few corporate people, they're not going to make responsible decisions. So the solution to their irresponsible decisions is to open it up to mob rule. Okay, right. Now tell them what's wrong with that.
All right. The argument goes, since everybody says all these writers and thinkers since the dawn of time have contributed to what AI does, therefore it's collectively owned. Therefore, we can steal anyone's intellectual property. I mean, that's what the argument boils down to. All intellectual property is therefore, that could be put in this form, is therefore collectivizable. So, look, I contribute, therefore my content can be stolen by everyone. More than that, the AI person is doing something unique. They're processing that information in a very distinct way. And what they're presenting is that processing of the information. Now, do I own, when I publish a book like that, do I own the ideas? No, no one can own the ideas, the truth behind it. What I own are the particular way I put words together. That's what my intellectual property is to that copyright material. Similar with AI, it is their crunching of this vast amount of data that is their property because it's their unique crunching of data. The ideas are not anyone's property. My book is mine. And until that copyright comes up, I have a right to the commercial benefits of it. Similarly here with AI, if it wasn't a unique crunching, there'd be no value to it. In other words, I could do, if I didn't need AI, no, but I need AI. I need AI to go through the big language model, to go through all these articles, books, Wikipedia.
Did you just say the big language model?
Yeah, that's what they call them, big language models.
No, they're large language models, LLMs, the big language models.
Yeah. I've heard both. But the point, though, is that what they're doing is they're re-crunching, reintegrating a whole bunch of words. It's this new integration. Now, this opens up another legal question. If they really do steal my phrase without any citation or credit, and they're making money on it, then they have violated my copyright. So my position is exactly and precisely the mirror opposite of the Jacobins' position. AI could violate individual property rights every day, and it appears to me that it's doing so. And these class action suits, it seems to me, have a basis. If Leonard Peikoff I show Leonard Peikoff an AI crunching, and he says, but that's exactly the three sentences I put together in exactly those words. Well, sir, your property rights have been violated by AI. And that's the kind of protection we need, the protection of individual property rights. Because guess what? There ain't no collective property rights. And the fact that the very idea that Aristotle and Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein aren't much bigger contributors to these large language models than I ever would be is obvious. And so it's the same kind of socialist, I'm going to, be a parasitical bloodsucker off my betters. That is exactly what Jacobinism really stands for in general, but in here in particular. So in other words, there's no individual property rights. It's collectively owned because certain, now a small list, mind you, are the main contributors. They're the specific ones being ripped off, not the whole of humanity, by the way. So this in terms of, historical understanding, it is utterly bizarre. Very few people contribute to these large language models. Very few comparatively.
Right.
So wrong in premise, wrong in conclusion.
And socialists are just wrong in their assumptions from the get-go. Their whole idea that we're a collective, that the very fact that I benefit. One of the things I find rich that they do, Jim, is when they make claims like, well, they went to tax-supported universities and therefore they owe back because they went there. Okay, so you insist that the government taxes people to begin with to fund these universities. Because I know it's not me insisting on that, right? You insist that the government builds the roads. You insist the government does all these things that I can't escape. And then you tell me because they've done all these things, I now owe. You know what it reminds me of, Jim? It reminds me of the guys that in New York City back, decades ago with the squeegee. They come over and they clean your window when you don't ask them. And then they say, hey, you owe me money now. I just cleaned your window.
Yeah, when my wife was a little girl, when Holly was just a little girl, her big brother gave her a quarter. Oh boy, and the little girl, if I give you a quarter. Weeks go by, a couple of weeks go by. Oh, well, you owe me now because I gave you that quarter. Wait, that was never an understanding or a condition of giving you. I thought you just gave me the quarter 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Okay, to do that is always wrong. See, but that is you put your finger right on something here. Individual obligations, chosen obligations. No such thing. It's not a question of individual evaluation for a socialist. Ever, ever, ever. Obama, you didn't build that because you didn't build the roads and you didn't build the schools, the examples that you gave. Well, wait a minute. Everybody had the same roads. Everybody had the same schools. I built this business. This business was, right, produced specific values in my neighborhood. Those values would never have come into being but for and small business. Those people work their asses off. It's running a small business is a 24/7 job. And so the idea that Obama is eliminating individual achievement when a small business is all individual achievement. Everyone's got the same damn roads. Why didn't you build that? No,
Yeah,
so this is the way it is with socialists. Socialists don't want to acknowledge that all achievement is individual. No, all thinking is individual. Only objectivism really understands this. Every new idea began in the head of one person. Everybody else learned from that person. Or there are times when things are independently discovered, but usually it's funny how they're aware of for example, Leibniz and Newton on calculus, or Wallace and Darwin on evolution. It was that moment, and these guys knew about each other at some point. So, but the point though is that all thinking is individual. There's no collective brain. Therefore, all achievement and creation is individual. Oh, by the way, all consumption is even individual. There's no way you can collectivize any of those things, but that is exactly the false universal premise of socialism, isn't it? There's no such thing as individual achievement, when in fact, there's only individual achievement. Nothing could be built. But even when you've got a team of thousands working on it, each person is doing what that person did. And no one outside of that team gets any credit. But even within that team, I can distinguish. I've worked with worked in businesses with teams many times, and I can tell you there's usually one or two people who are really driving the bus. And the others are kind of, here and there. And but then there's some people who don't do anything. So I can actually evaluate, even within group projects, who's carrying the load, who did what. The idea that there's no such thing as individual achievement is just false. And what that is the cosmic injustice of socialism. Socialism by its nature is unjust. Socialism by its nature destroys individual achievement, and therefore it must destroy incentive. If you don't get any credit for doing what you did, if I don't get any credit for doing what I did, why do it? Why should I? If I don't get any reward, I don't even get the credit. Why on earth should I be creative? Should I put in extra overtime? Should I put in extra effort? There's no reason.
Jim, I thought it would be fun, a little ironic, given that this article from Jacobin was about AI. So I copied the argument from them and I pasted it to ChatGPT. And I asked ChatGPT to assess this from an objectivist perspective. I thought ChatGPT did a marvelous job.
I bet they did. That's brilliant.
Okay, so there will be no Capitalist Corner tomorrow. I'm heading to NYC. But Wednesday we will be back. Of course, I'm going to make Jim give the capitalist thought of the day. And Jim, you are not to rehash the argument we had over originalism to try to get the last word, because I'm pretty sure that's what you were going to do. I would go over the question from the other day, but only one person answered it, and that was Jim. I asked, and Jim said there's been conceptual shrinkage since the 60s. I don't know if it's because we've all been going in the collective pool, but either way. So Jim, give us a capitalist thought of the day.
Capitalism is something very specific. Capitalism is something that is historically rare. Never let a progressive leftist or socialist define capitalism for you. They'll rarely define it anyway, because in their heads, it's anything they don't like. It could be feudalism. It could be the barter system. It could be anything they don't like is capitalism. But don't let them define it for you. Capitalism is something that happened only in certain places and at certain times and only to a certain degree. We've never had pure capitalism, ladies and gentlemen. That would involve the complete banning of the initiation of force as a matter of social policy. We have not reached that state yet. But capitalism did not exist 500 years ago. Capitalism did not exist 2,000 years ago. Capitalism does not exist in Somalia today. Never, ever, ever let a socialist tell you what capitalism is, because they will point to whatever it is they don't like and call it capitalism.
Thanks, Jim. My question. I just got HBO Max last night. So my question for the audience, what is a good show that I can watch on HBO Max? Something that I can make part of my nightly routine. I'm looking for a program. Don't make it The Sopranos, because I'm already watching that on Friday nights at my friend's house. But anything else, any other recommendations?
Have you seen Rome?
No. Okay, so Jim just violated the rules. You're supposed to go to YouTube and answer the question. So please go to YouTube and answer the question. What should I watch? And Ian Gilmore did it also. Okay, guys. The women are not making this mistake. It's only the impatient men. Maybe there was something to Mark's theory from the other day.
Yes.
Please go to YouTube because it helps with the algorithm, whereas here it does not. Go to YouTube and answer the question, what would be a good show for me to watch on HBO? And by the way, we will be back on Wednesday. Please go check out my debate with Professor Humor. It's on the Rational Alternative channel, The Michael Liebowitz Show. And please join us again on Wednesday for the Capitalist Corner, noon Eastern time. Thanks, everybody. And until then, check your premises.